Hi, welcome back to our Honors Geometry series. In this video, we're going to talk about how to prove that two triangles are congruent using either side, 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 or side angle, side. Now, I've got our typical steps 1 and 2 given and the definitions. I'm always going to look for those. So always look for your givens and your definitions. And I'm going to try to identify any reflexive property sides as well. So any shared sides or vertical angles, things like that. So let's take a look at our two-column proof there. And we're just going to do everything as two-column proofs. We're not going to worry about what type of proof they ask for right now. So given that BD is perpendicular to AC, so there's an angle and there's an angle. BD bisects AC, which means that these two things are congruent. I want to prove that ABD is congruent to triangle CBD. So there are three ways I could do that. There are two ways I could do that. I could either use three sides or three sides or two sides and an angle for side angle side. So I'm either going to use side, side, side or side angle side. First of all, let's get our given statements down. BD is perpendicular to AC. BD bisects AC. Excuse me. That's our given statements. And what I want to do typically, again, if there's anything to define, which it's already shown, if BD bisects AC, I'm already given that AD and AC, those were marked in previously. I'm given that those are congruent. They've already marked those. So next I'm going to look for, I did my givens, I looked for definitions, there's nothing new to define. I'm going to look for some reflexive property, sides, or vertical angles. So what sides could I say are congruent? Well, these sides are congruent because BD is going to be congruent to BD. That's a shared side, BD and BD. And something is always congruent to itself by the reflexive property. So let me mark that in. Anytime you identify something that is congruent, I'd like you to mark it in. And after every step, I would encourage you to check, do you have side, 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 or side angle side? So I do not have side, side, side. But at least in the left triangle, I have side angle side. And on the right triangle, I have side angle side. So once you have everything you need, you can say that your triangles are congruent. And in this case, these two triangles are congruent by side angle side. So the goal is get everything you can, and after every step, we should check to see if we have congruence. All right, I'm going to switch colors here. Let me move this stuff off to the side so I get a fresh start. All right, so 1R is the midpoint of QS and PT. That's given. So we always get our given statements down. Okay. Usually we look for a definition after that. So look through your given statement. Are there any vocab words we could define? And I can define midpoint. So if R is the midpoint of P, T, and QS, well, if R is the midpoint of QS, what does that mean? What can I say about those segments if R is right in the middle of QS? Well, that would mean that QR must be congruent to RS or SR. And I should probably say SR so that I'm consistent with the naming conventions up here. And let's check the other segment, PT. If PT has midpoint R, then what segments are congruent? Well, PR would be congruent to TR. And why can we say that again? That's the definition of a midpoint, right? Because if R is the midpoint, then PR and RT must be congruent, and QR and SR must be congruent. So let's mark those in. We said those were congruent. We said these are congruent. So I have side, side. I either need a side or I need an included angle. So one of those two things. So let's see, what else can I get that is congruent? I don't have any parallel lines. I don't have any other sides marked congruent, but I do have in the middle, got some angles here. And I can say that angle PRQ is congruent to angle TRS because those are vertical. And let's check again what we have. I have a side, an angle, and a side. And here I have a side, an angle, and a side. So that must mean that by side angle side congruence, my triangle PRQ must be congruent to TRS. And again, that was side angle side congruence. So kind of interesting, they both end up being side angle side. For a side 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 proof, you would need to prove that all three sides are congruent. Just remember, the two things you can always mark in, the only two things you can mark in that are never shown, are your reflexive property, shared sides in the middle, like these, or vertical angles. Those are the only two things that you can mark in and say are congruent without being given them. So let me know what questions you've got. I'd like you to try 5 and 6, write those first two questions on your homework, and